Welcome. Thank you all for being here. My name is Ryan Susky, and I'm Director of Programs at the Ohio Center for Law-Related Education, and I'll be serving as your facilitator today for the Unit 4 hearing for the We the People National Invitational here with Lakeside Middle School. In a moment, I'm going to ask the judges to introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we can go ahead and begin the hearing. The hearing procedure for today, students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judge follow-up questions. Now, my microphone is going to be muted during the hearing, and I'll be holding up the 1-minute and time signs. So I do recommend that you make sure you have your computer set to gallery view so that you can see my cards and, of course, your colleagues through the presentation. At the conclusion of the hearing, the judges will give brief feedback to the teams, and then we'll conclude and be on our way. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to your chairperson to begin the introductions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, Lakeside Middle School. Congratulations on making it here to the National Invitational. My name is Diana Owen. I'm a professor of political science at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C.
Hello, I'm Deshawn Whitaker, a We the People teacher in Charles County Public Schools in Maryland.
Joe, you're muted.
Yeah, but I just said that, but you couldn't hear me. My name is Joe Stewart, and I teach in the political science department at Clemson University in South Carolina. Everybody relax. We're going to have fun today, just having a conversation about the Constitution.
And if you would all introduce yourselves and your teacher. Would you like to introduce yourselves and your teacher?
Oh, sorry. Hi, we are Team Jefferson. We are from Lakeside Middle School. We represent Mr. Bannister's 7th period class. My name is Peyton Bowman, and an interesting fact about Thomas Jefferson is that he was a wine connoisseur and
Hi, my name is Jersa Jones, and did you know that Thomas Jefferson had a pet mockingbird named Dick?
Hi, my name's Ava Jane Meyer, and a cool fact about Thomas Jefferson is that he was a statesman.
Great. Well, thank you. We already learned something about Thomas Jefferson, and we've actually been talking about people who have pet birds with our group here. Okay, so your question for today is number 1. An American historian claims that the ratification debates were, quote, one of the greatest and most probing public debates in American history. Do you agree or disagree? Why? What evidence can you offer to support your response? Evaluate the major arguments the Federalists advance in support of the ratification of the Constitution. Evaluate the major arguments the Anti-Federalists put forth in opposition to ratification of the Constitution. Why did a Bill of Rights become a focal point for both the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists? Please begin.
Picture the scene, 3 teenage girls in a studious moment, but not all are on the same page. What will get them in the constitutional mood? Let's peek in on the conversation.
Hey Peyton, how often do you think about the Constitution?
not very often. Why do you ask? Ask me something I actually care about.
Why? It's important how we lead our daily lives.
What do you mean? My boyfriend impacts me more and is way more important than the Constitution.
Wait a minute. What about your right, like the right to free speech?
Yeah, and don't forget your rights to express yourself, like those fancy clothes of yours.
I think I see what you two are getting at, but don't we deserve these rights? Like, aren't we born with natural rights? Like what John Locke said?
Not completely. That's where the role of the government comes into play, but it was a hard-fought process involving much compromise.
Yeah, that's right. Something about the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, correct?
Okay, my brain's picking up now. I remember reading about your argument.
Good. Now we can get to work. Let's look at these arguments and then how the Constitution eventually allowed the Bill of Rights, which guarantees us with certain rights.
Sounds good. Let's begin.
I agree with the historian's statement. It forced the founding fathers to think critically and listen to one another.
Compromise became a prerequisite in order for a Republican form of government to be established.
A Republican form of government gives the power to the people where they elect leaders and trust in their judgment to represent with their best interest at heart.
The idea of a Republican government is to promote the common good, which simply means what is good for the community as a whole, not individual interests.
In other words, the Republican form of government is to protect, prevent, and promote the interests of the many, not the few.
This led to the creation of federalism, where the power is shared between the national and the state governments.
Within federalism, a system of checks and balances would help to ensure that no one branch would take advantage or gain too much power over the other branches. In the end, the goal was for the common interest of the general public to be protected.
The Federalists believed in a strong national government and that the people's rights were implied within the framework of the Constitution.
The Federalists believed that what was in the Constitution at the time was sufficient for the country. There was no need for a Bill of Rights, in their opinion.
Generally, they trusted that their initial presentation of the Constitution already promised general welfare for the people.
The Anti-Federalists had originally believed the Republican government would only work in a small community because people were more closely involved with one another. Thus, the people in power would continue to do what was best for the community. The smaller the community, the more likely communication would be understood.
They believed the system would be unsustainable for our new nation because it would become too diverse. The people's ideas and thoughts regarding the common good would be varied and thus harder to meet the needs of all, or simply stated, to protect, provide, and promote the interest in the larger community.
The Anti-Federalists, on the other hand, feared not only a strong national government, but the fact that the Constitution did not contain a Bill of Rights.
Without a Bill of Rights, the people could be easily suppressed. We just ended a war and broke away from a tyrannical king. Is no taxation without representation ring a bell?
The Anti-Federalists insist of adding a Bill of Rights. Today, this contains our first amendments, which include
Our First Amendment, freedom of expression, such as speech, petition, and assembly.
The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms.
Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, as well as the due process rights of the Fifth Amendment and 14th Amendments.
The Founding Fathers understood that compromise was necessary, not only to ratify the Constitution, but to ensure our rights were protected as well. Today, these rights seem to be more important than ever before.
As debatable as it may be, this concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much for that really interesting presentation. And you opened the door to a number of questions that I have. You raised the issue about how there was concern that the nation would become too diverse to be able to identify a common good that could be served by the Constitution. What do you think? Do you think that some of the founders were right about this idea, or do you think that our Constitution still holds up in the face of a very diverse population?
In my opinion, I think some of the anti-federalists were correct with that, because how I feel like I see it today, a lot of people are fighting. There's a lot of tension in our political system, and I think that is because people are very diverse and they have a lot of different ideas and opinions on what is right for our country. So I do believe that some people were correct.
And Dr. Whitaker, go ahead and start.
Thank you. All right, much better. Now I can hear everything. All right, so you discussed the Republican form of government. Could you explain the differences between a Republican form of government and a democracy?
I believe that a Republican form of government is more about the people and less about the central government. And I believe democracy is more focused on the central government and less about the specific people within that government. I'm not positive.
Okay. In the discussion of the 14th Amendment, of the Bill of Rights, you also mentioned the 14th Amendment. What's the importance of the 14th Amendment in terms of helping protect people's rights?
I think the importance of the 14th Amendment in protecting our rights is that when we go to court, it protects our right to not be unlawfully charged with crimes because it's the right to due process. So it's our right to have a lawyer, be listened to, and have a case presented to advocate for ourselves if we are charged with a crime.
So, do you think that we need a Bill of Rights today? Do you think that it's necessary?
I do, because without the Bill of Rights, we wouldn't have, our rights wouldn't be protected as well as they are. Like, for example, the right to bear arms. Politically speaking, it's usually more of a leftist point of view that we shouldn't have guns. And the Bill of Rights, with the Second Amendment, protects the American people's rights to bear arms. That applies to all of the amendments, really, but that's just an example.
I agree with my colleague. The Bill of Rights definitely serves its purpose of protecting our rights and ensuring that the people in government listen to what the people need.
Yes, I agree with my colleagues on that. I feel like it has done an amazing job protecting our rights, but just like one of my colleagues said, there are people who tend to not like certain ones, but then like some of them, but I feel like it does a pretty good job.
Oh, Dr. Stewart, you're muted.
Yeah, I noticed that. Sorry. Which of the rights that are in the Bill of Rights do you think is the most important, and why?
I think the most important right in the Bill of Rights is the freedom to express yourself, such as speech and that, because I feel like it's important that we have the right to express ourselves in whatever way we want, and just the right that we can put our opinion out there without it being wrong in a way.
I agree with my colleague on that. I believe the First Amendment, the freedom of expression, is the most important because without the First Amendment, I believe America wouldn't be how it is today, how it's a free country and how people can express themselves and do what makes them happy without other people having a say in what they do, as long as it's within law.
I agree with my colleagues on that point. The First Amendment really represents what America wants to represent of our freedoms and our freedom to be who we want to be and to promote the things that we want to promote in our lives.
So you think the founding fathers would say we have the constitutional right to use TikTok or Facebook or whatever the latest is? I apologize for being out of date here. Do you think that was something envisioned by the founding fathers?
I don't think that I don't think the founding fathers could have imagined social media, but I do think that they would agree with the way that people express themselves on social media because that's a central part of our rights.
Ava Jane, you had something to add to that too.
I was just gonna say the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. You talked about checks and balances. Can you explain what checks and balances are and give an example?
So checks and balances is basically a system so is basically a system to make sure that one branch of government doesn't get too powerful. For example, the executive branch with the president. The president has the right to make sure the good justices are in the Supreme Court, for example, the judicial branch, and that's one way of making sure the power like one branch doesn't gain too much powers, the president being able to make sure the Supreme Court's in check, and then the legislative branch and judicial branch being able to make sure the executive branch is in check. Basically, just making sure that one branch doesn't get.
And that's time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So thanks very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed hearing your opening statement. I thought that your opening, kind of talking about it kind of between the three of you and using that as an intro was a really fun way to start the conversation. But I also thought that it set things up in a really good way. Like, okay, well, what does the Constitution really mean to us or to people more generally? And then you were able, through your answer, to basically address that question that you asked in the beginning. So very clever way to start. I really enjoyed that part of it. I thought that in your prepared remarks, you did a good job of stating, kind of what the issues were during the Constitutional Convention, the tensions that were there, and the need for compromise. You did a good job of explaining what it was meant by a Republican form of government and the need for a government to serve the public good or the common good. And you did a good job of discussing the notion of federalism and the idea of shared powers and checks and balances. And you also did a good job of talking about what were the issues on both sides of the debate over the Bill of Rights. I like the fact that you raised the issue that, some of the founders were concerned that the country eventually would become so diverse that, maybe the Constitution might not be able to accommodate that. And then when I followed up with the Q&A on that, you gave a good response about the fact that, we are a diverse nation, and there's, there are some tensions that are still here in the political system. So overall, I thought you did a really nice job, especially on the prepared statement.
Yes, I agree with my colleague. You all did a very good job on your prepared statement. Nice, catchy way to grab our attention in your presentation. Your follow-up questions, your answers to the follow-up questions let us know that you do have some insight on particularly the Bill of Rights and how it has impacted our nation. And you talked about the concerns over the Bill of Rights and how that ultimately led to the compromise. You did a very good job. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing that's kind of the clear thread throughout your presentation is you've got a real sense of how this original conflict that we had continues to play out today. And it really showed up when, in response to my question, you were able to identify which right that you thought was important, but more importantly than that, you knew why you thought it was important, that freedom of expression was something that is fundamental and on which a lot of other things will hinge. You mentioned that 14th Amendment. It's extremely important, and you tied it into due process, which is the way the courts have extended those protections in the Bill of Rights that you talked about to protections against state government also. And so when you mention the Second Amendment, for instance, it's only in recent years that the court has said, well, that also protects us against state government infringing on rights. So good job. You've represented your school well, and the work that you and your teacher have put in, I think, is well reflected here. Thank you.